Sure.
So, okay. So this is not meant to be like the perfect answer. This is just meant to be a possible answer and to just kind of set us up through Redux again and see the general flow. Please like stop me with questions or anything, right? Let's try to make sure we understand each line of what's going on, okay? Agree? Oh,
Yep.
good. I got 5 yeses in the nonverbal. Jenya, tell me the official name. What was it, Jenya?
Non-verbal feedback feature.
The nonverbal feedback feature. I love it. It's like so catchy. It's perfect. Okay, so let's go over that. So I've created my React app here. Oh, you can't. Let me share the screen. That would be a good idea. Also, so yeah, I'm not going to share the screen. I'm just going to talk it through. Hopefully, you can follow along with your imagination. Imagination is always a powerful tool. So let's try to use it where necessary. Okay, so let's go to our React app. This is a fresh app. First thing I'm going to do is go into my app, and I'm going to just wipe that out because I don't want all that extra stuff. I'm going to delete my logo so it doesn't give me that annoying warning later, and I should be good. Okay. So let's start by installing the necessary packages. Can somebody give me one of them?
React Redux.
Okay, npm I React Redux. Perfect.
Redux.
And what else do we need?
And Redux.
Redux.
And Redux. Anything else that we need? No? All right, let's run it. In the meantime, I'm going to start to set up my skeleton a bit. I know I'm going to need actions, so I'm going to go ahead and make an actions folder. I know I'm going to need reducers, so I'm going to go ahead and make that. I know I'm going to have components. Hopefully I spelled that right. And I'm going to have a store. Do I need anything else?
Nah, I think you're good.
Okay, so let's go ahead and make our store first. So I'm going to make a file. I'm going to call store.js. And from here, what do I need to import from Redux to make my store?
Create store.
Create store. Excellent. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our store. So I'm going to say const store equals create store. And what does my create store, what do I absolutely require?
A reducer.
A reducer. Exactly. So I don't have a reducer. So right now I'm just going to put a function that doesn't do anything. But that way it won't throw an error. But I will add a reducer. What's the second argument that create store can take?
Initial state.
An initial state. So I'm just going to put in an empty object for now. And what's the third argument that our create store can take?
Answer.
Does anybody remember? What'd you say? I think I heard someone say it.
Answer.
And yeah, right. Enhancer is a middleware. So there is a piece of middleware I'd like to just touch on today a bit. And so I'm going to go ahead and use that. So I'm going to install here. Hopefully it's big enough. I'm going to npm install something called Redux-logger. You don't have to do this, but it is a nice thing to add. I know I hadn't shown it to you yet, but
Sorry.
but that's a nice thing. So I'm going, and in order to use middleware with Redux, I have to also import apply middleware, which is built into Redux as well. So I can say apply middleware and invoke that and pass in logger. Logger is coming from, we have to import logger from Redux, sorry. Logger. Okay. So we'll see what that kind of does, but essentially every time I dispatch an action, it will log to the console what the action is that it received. It will log what's the current state of the application, and then it will also log what the following state of the application is after this action is dispatched. So what middleware does in Redux is essentially it injects itself in the code when an action is dispatched. Before that action goes to the reducer, it runs the middleware. So it just kind of gets in the middle of the dispatch and the reducer. Okay. And let's also go ahead and export default R store. And in my app, in index.js, I'm going to go ahead and import my store from our store /store. And if I want to provide my entire application with access to my store, what do I need to import?
Provider.
Provider, exactly. Provider, and where does that come from?
React Redux.
Perfect. Perfect, Henry. React Redux, because we're in the React Redux world here. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a provider. Provider. I'm going to put store inside. Oops. Tab that. Okay. I don't know why it says X. Great. And I'm going to pass our provider, somewhat unavoidable at this stage. It will be a little nicer when we eventually get to Redux Toolkit. Yeah, Henry, I love that background with the bananas. Good call, Marvin. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our reducer. So I'm going to call this to-dos reducer because I think that's a good name. It's going to be very clear to me what it is. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it. Const to-dos reducer. And I'm going to pass in our state. What would be a good default state for our reducer? What do we think?
I would say a good default state would be an array.
Okay. Yeah, so our main options really are an array. So we'll have an array filled with objects, or we'll have an object filled with objects.
But I use the object though.
Sorry?
But I actually use the object.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to use an object too. Just because I think in the long run, if I were to continue to build out this application further, I'll be able to have an easier way of updating and manipulating state directly. Okay, and what's the second argument our reducers take in?
Action.
An action. Thank you, Rafid. And we can make a switch statement. And we will be looking at our action.type. And our default is we'll return state. And we should export default to-dos reducer. So this is like, so far, this is just kind of the skeleton, right? There's not really any code here, so to speak. Let's also go ahead and make a root reducer. So I will just call this root reducer.js. And from here, I'll import my to-dos reducer. What else do I need for my root reducer?
Combine reducers.
Combine.
Yeah. Who said that? I couldn't tell who it was.
I said some of it. Somebody
Maria?
else. Yeah.
Nice. Great. You're totally right. Combine reducers. So what this does is this is going to allow us to take in multiple reducers and combine them into one so that our store can access all of them. And this will be what separates or gives us our different slices of state. So this is going to be from our Redux. And I'm going to export default here, combine reducer. I think it's combine reducers, sorry. And this takes in an object. And here we say our key values. So I'm going to call this to-dos. And I'm going to have this point to our to-dos reducer. Okay, so far so good. Mostly boilerplate code still. Like this is super duper pattern driven. So every time you're writing a Redux app, it's going to essentially be this. All right. So we've got that. Let's go ahead and actually put this one in our store now. So in our store, we can import our root reducer. I don't remember if I capitalized it. Oh, I didn't. I just exported default, didn't I? So it doesn't matter. Reducer from the dot slash reducer slash root reducer. And instead of putting this bogus reducer in here, I'll just write my root reducer. Okay, so now we've got a store set up. We should technically have access to the store. Great. Let's go ahead and close that. And let's start to build some of our to-do app in general. So I'm going to make a new file in our components called to-dos main.js. And in my to-dos main, I'm just planning on rendering my to-do list as well as my to-do form. Okay, so this is like my whole app. So let's go ahead and import React from React. I'm going to I've been getting used to doing this and just exporting, but I don't have to do that. We can do const to-dos main. Doesn't take in any arguments, and this will return say a div with an h1, and we'll just have it say like to-do app for now, and we'll export default our to-dos main. Okay, let's go ahead and import this in our app to make sure we're getting it. So I'll just to-dos main. Whoops. And we check here, and we have a few issues. Good. Let's go ahead and start to debug. So it says in our index.js, it can't find store. All right. So that's because we're not going far enough. We have to go store/store. We can go back, and we see in our to-dos reducer, value is not defined. That's fine because there is no value here. We should probably start to write some case statement. We know we're going to have to add a to-do at some point or receive a to-do from the reducer. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's create a new file in our action. I'm going to call this action types.js. I'm going to say I'm sorry for the siren. I have so many sirens where I live. Anyway, I'm going to call this receive to-dos, to-do. And that's going to be a string. Okay, and I should export. Okay, so now I have this receive to-do. Cool. Let's go ahead and import that in here. I think I pasted it. There we go. From /actions. Okay. And so in the case that we get our receive to do, it's going to do that highlighting thing because of some package. Let's see if we can turn it off. Anybody know what package that is?
No, it was glowing for me
It's
too. I freaked out.
it's to do, yeah. Let me. I think I have it. Let me
To
try.
do highlighter?
Yes.
Okay, so just disable right now. Reload required. I'm gonna just do it. Otherwise, it's just gonna be annoying. Okay. Great. Okay, so now we have, in the case that we receive a to-do, what do we want to do? What would we want to happen?
We want to store that to do in our state.
Yep, that's exactly right. So why can't I just go like this? Action.payload. Let's say it already has an ID and point to action.payload. Why can't I do that?
Because you're not supposed to mutate the array or state.
State, exactly. Thank you, Jay. Right? Jay says, because we're not supposed to mutate the state, and this is mutating the state. So instead of mutating the state, I'm just going to make a new state. Let's say, so I'm going to use the spread operator on state. I believe this is a shallow copy technically. So, but here I can go ahead and put in my new state and then just go ahead and return my new state. So, okay, cool. So now we have this ability to receive it to do. So let's go and add a to do action. So I'm going to say action. I'll say to do actions.js, and I will import our receive to do from /action types. And I'm going to export a function. So I can say export const receive to do, and this is going to take in a complete to do. And since this is an action creator, what does it need to return?
Action type.
It needs to return an action. That's right. And an action is an object with a type property. So I'm going to go ahead and just do an implicit return here, so I don't have to write return. And so I'm actually returning the object already. And I will say receive to do, and my payload will be my to do. Okay. Any questions on that? All right.
Wait, sorry, quick question. I was
Yeah, perfect.
So so whenever the receive to do runs, right? In the object, you're not declaring an index, you're just getting the payload.
That's right. So great question. So Henry's question is like, what about I think when you say index, I think you're talking about the ID, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the idea. Like
yeah, so Henry's asking like, where's the ID? Well, in the directions of this lab, it does say that we have this additional slice of state called next to do ID or something, or next ID. And so in order to be accessing that piece of state, I'm going to do that when I'm going to create these. So that's going to be in my to do form. And so I'm going to grab the ID from the application state inside of my form, and build my to-do there and just pass the whole to-do in when I go to call receive to-do. Does that, Henry, does that make sense?
I can't wait to see it. So
Okay. Okay, let's try this out. So we've got our to-do action. We receive a to-do, our to-do main. Okay, so let's go ahead and build out our to-do form. And then we can just kind of test everything here. So let's go and make a to-do form.js. And we will import our React from React. Is this form going to need to dispatch anything?
Yeah.
yeah,
What will it need to dispatch?
What was it? Get to do. What did you have?
Receive to do?
Receive to do. Yeah, that action like on submit.
Okay, so if we know we're doing that, then I'm going to go ahead and just import our use selector right now. I mean, use dispatch. I misspoke, sorry. From React Redux. And we can also go ahead and import that action that we know we're going to use called receive to do from /action/ to do actions. Great. So let's go ahead and build this out. Const to do form. I'm not having it take in any arguments. And I'm going to export default to do form. And what should this to do form return? What would make sense for this to return?
a form.
A form, yeah. Excellent. So if I'm filling in a form, I'm also probably going to be using state. So I'm going to go ahead and import use state right now. For my form, like what should a to-do have? Does it need a title? Does it need a body? Should it just be a body? What do we feel like having?
Just a body, I guess.
Okay, we'll make it just a body for now. We can always go back and update it. So, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and make that piece of state. So I'm going to say const body, set body, and that's going to be our use state. And this will be start as an empty string. We will make our input. And inputs are React inputs controlled or not controlled?
Controlled?
Put yes if they're controlled in the nonverbal feedback, and no if they're not controlled. Okay. Nice. So overwhelmingly, as in everybody so far that's voted, believes that inputs are controlled. And I completely agree. That's best practice. And so in order to control our inputs, we have to give them a value property. So I'm going to go ahead and make my value be whatever is the body part of my state. I'm going to add an onChange listener. That's going to, when triggered by an event, it's just going to set the body to our event.target.value. And I'm not going to put a placeholder, but I could. And let's go ahead and let's not worry about a submit button. Let's just go ahead and make it on submit. People will just hit enter. That will be the user experience that we're expecting. And so on submit, let's go ahead and call another function called handle submit. Right. So a lot of this is pretty mean, even this feels like boilerplate code because we've done so many of these like forms.
Should prevent it.
Right, if you'll notice, they're all conceptually the same, right? They really are pattern driven. Hopefully you're starting to pick up that pattern. And so we'll prevent our default. And then now's when we get to think of like what we actually want to do here, right? We have a little bit of thoughts. Well, we said we want to use dispatch, so we should probably bring that in here. So I'm going to const dispatch is equal to use dispatch. And now I can dispatch our receive to do. Our receive to do takes in a to do as our argument. So right now we have body as an argument, and that's all we have, but we do know that we're expecting to give an ID property. So just for purposes of right now, let's go ahead and just make ID point to 1. So just so we can see if it's working. And I think there's a good way for us to see our store. There are Redux toolkits, but I'm not sure. Okay, so we've got our form here. Let's see what our errors are. The switch statement and our to-dos reducer. It doesn't like, it's not what the code is, right? Huh. Okay, what is this error? Parsing error, expected, token. Oh, maybe refresh, it says. Maybe it's not. Oh, I don't think it's running anymore for some reason. Let's start it up again.
Oh, because remember you had to do the reload for the highlight.
For the highlight?
Yeah, I think you
Oh,
rebooted VS Code.
right. So it's turned it off. Thank you. All right. So we're waiting for that. We've got our to-do app. Okay, we have to import our form into our to-do main. So let's go ahead and do that. So just going to go ahead and do to-do form. And we've got some form, and we can type, hit enter. And we see when I hit enter, we can look in our console. Now this is coming from that logger that we added as our middleware. And so we can see this is the previous state. So we currently have to-dos with an empty object. We see the action. This is a type of receive to do with this payload of body and some random text that I typed in with the ID of 1. And then we see this next state where we have what our new state looks like, where it has 1 pointing to body and with the ID of 1. So it's working. Everything we've written is working. That's cool. I'd like for this to clear, so I'm just going to go ahead inside of our to-do form and update that so that we can set body back to be an empty string. So now we can try again, and we'll put like buy milk. We hit enter, and we see we did receive the to-do, and our new state is this body of buy milk with our ID of 1.
Hey, Corey, quick question.
Yeah.
So that's what I ended up doing to clear my input. But like before, I spent a whole bunch of time like trying to key into like the actual input and actually clearing the value, but it doesn't work when I try to clear the value. I key into the input. So I get into the input, and actually it's probably like e.target dot first child dot something, and then you get to the input, and then I get to that input and then I actually go and like clear the value with, instead of set body, I try to clear the value or set
Okay.
the value to like the empty string, and it wouldn't clear. So
That's
I have
because our value is determined by our body in this case. If you're using a controlled input, trying to do it that way won't work.
okay.
This is the proper way to do it. Okay, so here we have this ID of 1. That's not so hot, right? This looks kind of hard-coded. But we did see that in the directions, it says that we should have another slice of state that says next ID. So if I want to make another slice of state, where's the first thing I should start thinking about adding code? Write in the chat. Okay, everybody write in the chat where you would start to write code if you're about to start a new slice of state. I'm not seeing any writing. Oh, there we go. Marvin says root reducer. Okay, nice guess. David, reducer. Dwagabasi, reducer. Sam, reducer. Awesome. Who else we got? Rafid with the up arrow, reducer. John Jones says reducer. Cool. Okay, Henry says root reducer. Okay, so we've got a couple reducer fans and a couple root reducer fans. Maria says root reducer. Phil, reducer. Danny, create reducer. Okay, cool. All right. So, and Sin says reducer, I agree. Yeah, so if it were me, I'd probably start with another reducer. And then after I finish writing that reducer, I will update our root reducer. Because everyone who said root reducer, you're correct that this is where the slices are determined. But in order to have a reducer to add into here, I'm going to go ahead and write that first. That's the only reason. So everybody is pretty much right. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this next to do id.js. I need to have, okay, well, we'll worry about that in a second. So we're going to call this const next to do id. Let's say reducer. This takes in state. What would be a good starting state for this? What do we think?
I would say probably 1.
How come?
Because we're incrementing from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, depending on how we add our to-dos in.
Cool. Yeah, I'm totally on board with that, right? Because we're going to keep incrementing our ID. And it seems easy to increment it by 1, so it seems like 1's a good place to start. Okay, and we have an action. And we have this switch, right? This is our essential skeleton for our reducers. Export default. Next to do reducer. Our key here is action.type. That's always. So, and our default is we'll return state. Oops, return. So let's think about what we should do in here. What should we listen for? This is something that's kind of interesting. And don't answer right away yet, but I want us to think for a second, like what should our next to do ID reducer listen for in order to give us back this new incremented state? Okay, so think about your answer here. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to think about your answer.
Can you repeat that question for me, Corey?
Yeah, I can repeat it and write it down. I should say, what type, action type should we listen for in order to update this slice of state? Okay, so what action type should we listen for in order to update this slice of state? So I want you to think about this because it's kind of an interesting question. Think about it for about 10 seconds or so. And then I want you to write in your answer in the chat, but not enter it yet. And then I'm going to say, okay, enter. And everyone should enter at the exact same time. Okay? It's going to be great. It's going to be great. I'm not sure. That was like a half Borat. So, yes, it's going to be a good time to talk about what do you like in slice? One slice of pizza. Yes, I know Redux. Okay. Everybody got their answers? Go ahead and nod. All right. Go ahead and type it into the chat. And when I say go, enter. Okay, yeah. Okay, enter. Let's go. Let's go for it. All right. What do we see? Ujwaga Basi wrote something long. Would it be listening to when you add another to do? Oh, very good question. Add to do, submit, receive to do. Once the to do is submitted, add to do, receive to do, add to do, add to do, add to do, add to do. Yes. Okay. Overwhelmingly. Nice job. Yeah. And Henry coming in still. Henry Deja next to do. Danny next to do. Excellent. Phil, receive to do. Very good language. Very specific language. I like that. Yeah. And Danny wrote it twice. Cool. Okay. So let's go ahead and actually do that. I agree. I think we should be listening to this receive to do. So we've actually already got that action type made. So let's go ahead and import that. Receive to do. I'm spelling these right. It's like I before E except after C, right? So from /actions/action. Oops, action types is what I'm looking for. And so in the case of receive to do, we want to return this new state, which is just going to be our state plus 1. Okay. Cool. So let's go ahead and update our root reducer as directed by some of you in the last round who guessed that.
Question.
Yeah, Henry.
On line 1, you are calling receive to do twice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because I misspelled the first one, I think. There we go. I only want to import it one time. It's supposed to be the same thing. I think I misspelled it because it's me. I'm definitely not going to win a spelling bee anytime soon. Yeah. Thanks, Maria. Samantha, everybody, it's like, oh my God, if I could just make $1 for every time I misspell something, I would retire. Okay, so let's add this to the root reducer as suggested by Henry and Maria earlier when we were talking about different slices. So I'm going to go to our root reducer. I'm going to import our next to do index. I forget what I called it. Next to do ID. Okay. Okay, from /. Okay, and to make that next slice of state, I'm just going to call it next ID, and I'm going to point that to our reducer. Okay. That's not what my file's name is. Is it? It's all about spelling. That's every error is generally about spelling for me. Okay. All right. I wasn't consistent with my naming. I should have called this reducer, but I didn't. Anyway, we should now have the slice of state. So if I want to access and have access to that slice state, what do I need to use? Who can tell me?
Repeat that.
Yeah, sure. So if I want to actually use that piece of my application state to set this ID to it, what do I need to,
Use
how can I
selector.
actually do this?
Use selector.
Cool, I'm getting a
You
lot of
select the
use selectors. I love it. Yeah. So let's go ahead and import use selector as well. And I'm going to go ahead and pull out my ID from use selector. So I'm going to say use selector. Use selector takes in the application state. And I say the slice I want. So I'm going to call this next ID. So I'm just returning my next ID slice, and I'm assigning it to the variable ID. And because of that, I can just do body and ID like so. So let's go ahead and test this work. Let's go over here. Let's say buy milk, and we see our next ID has updated to 2. We have bought milk. Let's go ahead and try exercise. And we received another to-do. We see our next ID did increase, and our to-dos object now has our buy milk and exercise. So everything is working as hoped. Any questions so far?
Corey, real
Yeah.
quick, just to be clear, this thing that's printing out on the console, that's from the middleware, right?
This is from my middleware logger, which we're getting in our store here. We are calling apply middleware. Oops. This
Okay.
is something we're importing from Redux itself. And then as our third argument to our create store, we're calling apply middleware as a function and passing in the middleware that we want to pass in, which
Got
is
it.
logger. It's pretty nifty. You just have to remember to take it out, like when you're pushing to production or submitting your test or something, because like obviously we don't want to actually see this. You don't want to go to someone's website and actually see the updates to the store. I mean, it'd be kind of cool, but you don't really want your users to see stuff like that.
Oh, cool. Nah, that's super clean. That's clean. I like it.
But yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it's cool. It definitely helps with some debugging. There is also a Redux dev tools. I haven't appropriately set it up on this computer, but you can use that as well. It's not too bad to set up. I encourage you to look into that. Okay, so
Corey,
yep,
could you please go to the next to do ID reducer?
absolutely.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Right, so all we're doing is looking at that action type, listening for a receive to do, and then we're going to update that state.
Okay.
That we're ensuring we have a unique ID.
Mhm.
In reality, we would be getting this ID from our database, right? We don't tend to tell our databases what the IDs are, but this is just a good practice to see an example where we're listening for the same thing, the same action that a different reducer is listening for. Okay, so I think the last main thing here is to actually display all of these to-dos, right? So in our, let's make another component. I'm going to call this to-do list. So we'll say to-do list.js. And we're going to import React from React. Will I need access to anything in my application store in this component? What do we think?
Repeat that again, sorry?
Go ahead in the nonverbal feedback. Give me a yes or no. Do I need to access things from my store in this component? If you're unsure, that's okay. We'll get to it. We'll know it in a minute. Cool. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Brandon Brown, can you unmute yourself for a second and tell me why you say yes and what we need from the store?
You will need the ID, won't you? The next to do ID.
Okay, so I don't think we actually need that, but you are right that we do need access to our store. I think since this is a list of to-dos, I think we're just going to need our to-dos.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
All right, so like you know how so in the documentation it said that you wanted the state to be set up where you added the to-dos to the list as an object, and that object had a ID, the text. You're not doing it that way, right? You're like doing it a different way.
Unsure. I thought I've been doing it the same way that
It said that it
was
should
asked.
be added to the to the array of to-dos. Well, in the documentation, it said that.
It wanted an array of to-dos?
Yeah, with objects, and the to-do should be like an object that had the text, the ID, and I think something else.
Yeah, it was like was it visible? No, it wasn't visibility. It was something else. I know what you're talking about.
There is a visibility filter, but we haven't got to it yet.
No, it was the completed, actually. It was the
completed.
Yeah, it was the completed.
Yes. We should add that as well. Good. That's a good memory. So we can just do that here where we make our to-dos, and I'll start every to-do having a complete of false. So that's an easy fix for that. And I can just prove that worked. I'll put milk. I'm going to do some milk. And we have our complete false here. But if we're just going to list down our to-dos, I think we will need to access our store, but we're only going to need the to-dos. So let's go ahead and import our use selector. Okay, use selector from our React Redux. And let's make it. So we'll call this to-do list. Doesn't take in anything, and we can export default our to-do list. And we will return some kind of UL of things. And so let's go ahead and see what we can take out of our state. So let's go ahead and say we know we want our to-dos eventually. So we'll say to-dos. We'll use selector. This takes in our state. And let's see what exactly we can take from our states. I'm going to throw a debugger in there so we can hit that and play around. Okay. So upon the refresh. Oh. I need to import this into my to-do main. And I'm going to do that underneath. Say to-do list. And now we're here. This, I'm going to take a look. We'll say state. And we see our to-dos are empty. That makes sense because we haven't actually added any to-dos. So I'm just going to continue through until we actually add one. I'm going to say milk. We're back here. Let's go ahead and look at our state. And we see that. So to get those to-dos, I know I can say state.todos. But this gives me this object. All right, let's see if I can make this bigger. This gives me this object with one pointing to our to-do. So what part of this object do we really care about?
The values.
We just care about the values. So I can get that by saying object.values and passing in our state.todos. And if I do that, we get this array of objects where we have body milk, ID 1, complete false. So that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and copy that. we will remove our debugger in our to-do list. And I'm just going to return our object.values at state.todo. So let's start mapping through. So we'll say to-dos.map to-do. And it would be best for me to make this really clean and make another component that's going to display a to-do list item. So I'm going to code as I wish I had things. So I'm going to say to-do list item, and I'm going to pass in my to-do being a to-do. And I'm going to also pass in that key because this is an iteration, and I'm going to do to-do. Whoops. My unique key will be my to-do.id. Okay, so this is the code I wish I had, but to-do list item isn't defined. So let's go ahead and make that file. To-do list item.js. From here, we'll import our React from, whoops. We'll import React from React. We'll call this to-do list item. This takes in a to-do, so I'm just going to destructure that out. I'm going to export default our to-do list item.
That error.
Oh yeah, I still have an error because we haven't imported.
No, the default error in line 3.
Oh, thank you. Syntax error. Appreciate it. Good catch, Siam. And then let's go ahead and import this. So we will import from /to-do list item. Okay. And everything worked, but we don't have, when we're not actually displaying anything. So let's go ahead and add something to display here instead of null. Let's return an li because we put it inside of a ul, and we'll just do our to-do dot, I think we called it body. Looks good. Let's give it a shot. Okay, so we'll write milk, and we see our milk, and we'll say dim, and we go, okay, this looks like we've got a basic kind of like to-do app here happening. Any questions on this? Any questions? Any questions?
Corey, can you go back to that last component you just created?
Yeah. This is like our classic functional, like old time presentational component. It's not doing anything for doing a little bit of presentation. What else? What other questions do we have? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Yeah, so or a 4-minute, whatever. Be back at 8:05, and we'll continue this. Okay. I've resumed my recording. Thank you, Henry, for reminding me in my head, because Henry always reminds me on that now. So I hear his voice like the same way I hear my wife's every time I don't clean something up. I just hear it and then I clean it. All right.
That's too loud, Corey. She
Great living with people.
Yeah, is she not hearing you? Like,
I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. No, I'm just kidding. She's probably can hear me. She knows I joke around. She's fun. She would say the same things about me. You'll see it. You'll all meet my wife, and then you'll no longer feel uncomfortable with the jokes because you'll be like, "Oh, she's the worst." No, you'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I get it. She dishes it right back out. Don't worry. I'm not like picking on someone who can't back. But I am talking behind her back. But she's great. Anyway, let's keep going. Okay. So what would be the next feature we would start to think about? Maybe these are the tigers. We do have 2 cats. So who wants to tell me? Like, you know, we've got this to do. We've got like the making of it to do. Feed the cats. What would be the next good feature?
Being able to cross it out.
Yeah, right. Being able to cross it out, cross it back in. So let's go ahead and start to work on that. Do we need a new reducer for this? Go ahead and write yes or no in the nonverbal chat. In the nonverbal feedback attribute or whatever. In the Genya chat. Jenya's like, I wish I hadn't said anything. Okay, so overall we've got no's, a couple yeses. So for this one, we do not actually need a new reducer. So why is that? Because a reducer can be in charge of listening for more than just one action. So we have a reducer that's in charge of to-dos. We have this to-dos reducer. It's currently listening for receive to-do. But there's no reason why I can't also listen for like toggle to-do. That would be okay. We don't want to split up our reducers by features. We want to split up our reducers mostly by application state. Now you can make multiple reducers to help with the same piece of state, but for such a kind of an application that we're dealing with, where it's not too in depth, I don't think we really need to do that. Certainly not for just toggling. So let's go ahead and add that action type. I'm going to call this toggle to do because it seems like an all right name. Toggle to do. I am going to make my action. Let me save that. Let me go to our actions, to do actions, where I'm also going to import our toggle to do. Export const our toggle to do. What should our toggle to do take as an argument?
An ID.
Yeah, I think we can get by with just the to do ID. And I'm going to do an implicit return here to just directly return my object, just to keep things a little bit cleaner. And I'm going to say toggle to do. I don't expect to need to use a debugger. I don't know why it jumped all these things, but okay. I'll put that here too. And our second item will be payload. And I'm just going to have that point to our to do ID. To do ID, to do or not to do. That is the question. Whether it's just noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune or to take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing and them. Let's go to our to-dos reducer. To sleep, perchance to dream. There's the rub. We will also import our toggle to do here. And we'll listen for that case. So we'll say case, toggle to do. And so when we do that, we need to update just that one to do. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that to do. So I'm going to say const to do is equal to, and I'm going to make a new object there that I'm going to spread over for our new state. And the reason I think I have to do this again is because this initial spread is only doing a shallow copy. So that means it's only copying one level deep, but it's not copying the objects inside of that object. It's just copying all the keys and the concept of the object, but not that inner object. So by going new state at action dot payload dot ID. By the way, I think something like this would work and is a little cleaner, I think I could destructure this and say type payload. And then everywhere where I'm saying action, I can just get rid of. Let me check to see if that works. But that's another way to make this just like a little bit cleaner. This is still taking in an action. Destructures. Right, because I know I'm just passing in a type and a payload. Okay, and then this should give me back that actual to do. So now let's go ahead and update that. So we'll say to do dot complete is equal to not to do dot complete, and we can return our new state. Okay, so let's go see if we can make this work. So when would we want to fire this action? When should this dispatch occur? Who can tell me that one?
On click.
On click. So which component should include the dispatch?
The to-do list.
Okay, let's think about that. So we'll go to our to-do list, and we could add it here.
Oh, the to-do item.
Or we could add it to the to-do list item, right? Either one of those works. I'm going to add it in here for now, just to show how we can like really spread our state. So I'm going to import our use dispatch from our React Redux, right? And on click.
You're missing a C in dispatch.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and do const dispatch use dispatch. I'm waiting for the IntelliSense or whatever, that typing that just like really knows what I'm thinking. But I think we're a ways away from that. So on click, let's go ahead and it's gonna fire an action. So let's go ahead and dispatch we got to get our toggle to do. So let's go ahead and import that from our action creator, toggle to do from /action/ to do action. Oh man, it always gives me the wrong one. To do actions. And we can go ahead and say toggle to do, and this takes in the ID. So we can say to do.id. Okay, let's see if that's working for us. So we can go over here. We can add a to do. Let's say we add milk. I don't know what to do. I don't know what doing milk is, but I seem to use it a lot. And we will click on that milk. We see we did fire off the payload of toggle to do and payload with 1. So that's cool. We can check on our next state, and our to do now has complete false in it. So it actually didn't work. Did it? Complete false. So it's not actually flipping the sign for us. So let's go figure out why. So that's happening in our to-do reducer. To-do reducer. And why is it not? It is called complete. Let's see.
What I did was I just keyed into state and did like keyed in all the way in, and instead of doing to do complete, I just did the opposite of like the state.
Oh yeah, you know, I think instead of spreading it, I hear you. I think I can do this. I can take out my to do here. And I can change. Wait, how do I want to do this? Yeah, I can, hang on. I think, why can't I just do this? Where I say complete is I'm getting thrown off. Why am I getting thrown off? What do we think? Let's see, I already wrote this earlier. Let's see. The funny thing is oh, you know what it is? Let's go back to what we had. So we have this to do that's been updated, but we haven't actually updated our new state. So I have to go ahead and go back into our new state and say if the payload.id should be assigned to this to do. Is that what you were saying, Danny?
No, that's not what I was saying, but yeah, I think that's gonna work.
Okay. So what the issue was that I was just creating this object. I was updating this object, but I wasn't reassigning that to be the value at the spot in our new state. I was just letting it happen and then moving on. So let's go ahead and check if that works. I hate when these flip around. Okay. So let's go ahead and do some more milk. And we'll click on milk this time. we get a whole other error. Great. What is this error? Toggle to do cannot read property complete of undefined. Complete of undefined. Okay, let's use some debuggers as to our advantage and figure out what is going on. Because maybe this destructuring isn't working the way we want it to be working either. So I'm going to put a debugger here and let's debug. So I'm going to continue through here. I'll continue. Let's go ahead and do some milk. We've added it. I click on milk and we hit our debugger. Oh, our payload is 1. My mistake. So, right, because our action here, well, I think I already destructured action, but we have our type and our payload. Our payload is the ID. So it's kind of silly that I'm trying to do payload.id because payload.id is undefined. That doesn't make any sense. So I just need to be using payload here, oops, instead of our ID, which means I also need to be using payload here. So that was just more like carryover confusion from basing some thought processes off of our receive to do. So I'm fairly certain this will work now. If not, I'm gonna be really annoyed. But you know, that's programming. So let's go ahead and do some more milk. Let's take a look at our console. I'm gonna toggle. We've toggled our to-do, and we see that this time our to-do's complete is true. If I click on it again, it should go back to being false. And it does. Whoops. So we're in good shape. Okay, so we've got the toggle. So now all we need to do is add a little bit of CSS to make it look like it's got a line through it, right? So let's go into our source file. Let's add a CSS folder. I'm going to create a file in there, and I'm going to call that to-do list item.css. Before I forget, I'm going to import that into my to-do list item. Just otherwise I know I'll forget. /css/to-do list item.css. And based off of whether or not the to-do is complete, I'm gonna give it a different class name. So I'm gonna just break this up a little bit so that it's a little bit more readable. And I'm gonna say class name. And that's gonna be to-do.complete. Complete. So if our to-do is complete, we're gonna say complete. Otherwise, it's gonna be unfinished. Okay, so I've got two possible options. They're based off of the property of my to-do. And so let's go ahead and add that into our CSS file. So I'm going to say dot complete. And I believe it's text decoration line through. And we say dot, what did I say? Incomplete? What did I?
That's unfinished.
I said unfinished. Stupid. Unfinished. I'll say text decoration, and we'll just make it none. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if that works. Let's do some soda this time. And we click, and it goes a line through, and we unclick, and we get it back. Okay, so now we've completed the next part of our to-do app. Well, let's bring on the questions. What do we got here? Marvin, thank you for the golf claps. What are we thinking?
Can I see your reducer again?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's to-dos reducer. So what we're doing here is we're copying over our state into a new state object. We're keying into that object to get the actual to-do that we want to update. We are making an update to that to-do, and then we're reassigning this to-do to be the new to-do. And I think I actually should be going like this. Because I don't want to actually manipulate the thing directly. Let me just make sure it still works. Good. So our project had, I think, just one more like MVP, right? Which is our visibility filter. So if there's no questions, I'm going to move on to that. Otherwise, I'd love to answer some questions. Okay, we will keep going then. So tempted to do a whole class in a different voice. Okay, so let's go ahead and make so if I'm creating visibility filter, we're going to start with a new kind of slice of state. So where should I start? What are we thinking? You can write it in the chat.
Well, if you're doing a new slice of state, would you want to do another reducer?
That sounds good, Ashia. Okay, we don't need to write it in the chat. I agree with Ashia. Thank you. We can create another reducer. So let's go ahead and make that new slice. So I'm going to create a new file. I'll call this visibility filter. I could call it reducer at the end. I just know the more typing I do, the more chance that's going to be a bug. That's also why I've been doing a lot of export defaults like this. Because I don't actually have to give it a name. And then I have less chance of spelling things wrong. So we need to create a new action type to set this actual visibility filter. So I'm going to go to my action types. And I'm going to call this set visibility filter. Okay, so we've got a new action type. Save that. I never need to open that again for now. And we're here. I'm going to import that for my switch statement. Okay, and so we've imported that. Now, what would be a good default state here?
I was wondering, can you make a string?
Yeah, we can definitely put a string. What string would make sense for something like this?
Like all.
All? Okay, so all would mean we want to show all of our to-dos, yeah? And the options would be all active and
completed.
Completed, okay, great. So let's go ahead and make our skeleton. So I'll just make a quick switch statement here where we listen to action.type and we return our state. And so we know this is the case we're going to listen for. And what do we actually want to happen here? What does this look like?
We want to return the I guess the payload.
Okay, so we could just straight up return the payload to be our new state. So our payload would be some string of either all, active, or completed. Well, that sounds good to me. Are there any questions about about that? So we're going to be doing the filtering on the front end.
Question.
Based off of our state. Yeah, Henry.
So you see how we create in the other reducer, you created a new state in order to represent the shallow updated version of the object, right? Why are we not doing that here?
Oh, because I am not actually updating the string. Strings are already immutable. They're a primitive in JavaScript, right? Primitives are things that cannot be mutated in JavaScript. Integers, strings, booleans, those are all considered primitives and they're immutable. So I don't have to worry about mutating the string. I can't mutate this string in JavaScript. Cool. Okay. Something like that.
Ya tú sabes.
Bien. Okay. So let's go ahead and give this into our root reducers. We actually have the slice of state. So I'm going to import whatever I just called that, visibility filter from / visibility filter. And these I'm giving to be the same name. So I could just go like that at the moment. Maybe I should make this just for consistency's sake. But I could have done it the other way just as well. Okay, so now we've got this additional slice of state. We can see it really quick if I just type in milk. We'll see that now we have our visibility filter of all. Okay, so let's go ahead and add some action creator for our visibility actions. So I'm going to create a new file called visibilityactions.js. I am going to import, see if I still have it. Oh, I don't. I'm going to import set visibility filter from our action types. Whoops. And I'm going to export our set visibility filter. And this is going to take in some sort of filter, which is what we're passing in as our payload. I'm going to wrap this in parentheses so I can do an implicit return. And I can go ahead and say set visibility filter and payload is filter. Great. So now we've got this action. So let's go ahead and add another component that is in charge of dispatching all of these filters. Okay, so I'm going to add a component, and I'm going to call this visibility. I'll call it visibility filter.js. Import React from React. We've decided that we're going to be dispatching our actions from this component. So I'm going to import our dispatch, or specifically our use dispatch hook given to us by React Redux. Yeah, that's what it's called. Sorry. Brain freeze. Okay, and we're going to const our visibility filter. Return something. Let's say div export our visibility. So much there's so much boilerplate code, just like typing to the point to get your thing out, you know, which isn't so bad when you're not sure how you want to design it. But once you have like a feeling of how you want to design it, it's just like you can only go as fast as you can type, which can sometimes be frustrating. So, okay, let's add these buttons. So we have some button here that we can say all. We should get our dispatch ready. It's equal to use dispatch. And on click here, we can go ahead and fire a dispatch that takes in our set. We need that action as well. So let's go ahead and import that. Set visibility filter from /action/visibility actions. And I can call that, invoke that, and say the string all. And I can do this we're going to have 3 buttons that we said was going to be active. And we said was going to be complete. Complete. Okay, and maybe not the cleanest looking thing in the world, but it's there. Let's go ahead and import this into our to-do main as well. Let's do this underneath our form. I think would be a nice spot for it. Okay, so we hit some. I didn't say export const. You can just see I'm saying export set. So that's a nice error. It makes it pretty easy for us to see what's wrong. Okay. And we'll go here. And we see we can click on that and we get the visibility to be all. We can click that and we get our active is now the new visibility, and complete is the new complete. So now all that's left for us to do is to actually filter these suckers. Where would be a good spot to do this filtering?
In the list?
Yeah, right, in the list where we're actually dealing with all of our to-dos. So we can go ahead and use our selector again, but to actually take out the filter. So we can call use selector state, and we can say state dot visibility I can't spell where the damn visibility filter. I hope that's it. Yeah, that looks right. Okay. So notice I am using selector twice. That's totally fine. That's completely normal. If I'm using two different slices of state, I should use two different methods. It's one of the beautiful things with hooks is that we're able to separate out our worlds a little bit better. Now I could write a function here that goes ahead and filters things. So let's go ahead and write that. So I'm going to call this filter to-dos. And for now, it doesn't need to take in anything. And so I will say if filter is equal to all, we can just go ahead and return our to-dos, right? There's no need to change them. If filter is equal to complete, well, that's no big deal. We can also just return our to-dos dot filter, where to-do takes in a to-do, if to-do dot complete. So if it's complete, we will get the ones that are only complete. We could write an else, but I'm going to do if just in case like we wanted to do more filtering. I'll say if filter is equal to active. Then we can just go ahead and return our to-dos dot filter, takes in to-do, and we'll say not complete, to-do dot complete. Okay, so this should go ahead and filter all of our to-dos for us.
Why aren't you writing it in if-else statements?
Sorry?
Why aren't you writing it in if-else statements?
I feel like this is probably cleaner for me. I feel like if otherwise I'm using else or else if, and I'm just doing it back and forth, but our filter is only going to ever be one thing. So I don't really need to add that. Just add those things. That's more just like personal preference, I guess, because this is a one-liner for me. And I don't like writing else if statements in a different format. So then this would be my only else if. But if I ever wanted to have another filter, then I would have to update my else to be an else if and then have an else. But instead I can just keep writing ifs. That's more just a style preference.
Okay.
No real reason as to like why this is the way. Not true. This is just the way I like to write. I would even consider moving these to one line themselves. So to just be like this. Because I kind of like code like this sometimes. Because if it's not that long, any of them, so like that's not a bad function. And I'd really like to have my component be smaller too. So I could actually pass in to-dos here as an argument and filter. And then I could just move this to be like a helper function outside of our component that I can call here. So now I could just call filter to-dos and pass in our to-dos and our filter, and this should work. So we have our small component here and our helper function. I could tuck this away into some other file, but I probably wouldn't because we are using it only here at the moment. So it seems like I might as well have it here. And then we can go ahead and add, let's say milk, school. I'm going to cross off milk. Active, we say just school. Complete, we see milk. All we see milk and school. So it still works. I don't like that adds to the bottom, like eat. So I'm just going to call a quick reverse on it to solve that problem. So now I can do milk, school, eat. And I prefer that. Cool. Any questions on any of that? That is overall that whole lab, I think, right? Let me know if we're missing anything.
Corey, could you please explain filter to dos? I'm sorry, line 18.
Sure. So in line 18 here, I'm calling a helper function and passing in the argument of these to-dos, which I'm coming from my store, as well as this filter, which is also coming from the store. This function is returning an array. So it's either returning all my to-dos or a filtered version of my to-dos based off of whether or not the filter that's being passed in is complete or active. So this is an array. I'm then just reversing that array so that I get to see what I've most recently typed in coming in off the top. And then I'm doing the general mapping through an array where I look at each to-do, and then I'm returning the to-do list item where I'm passing it in the to-do itself as a prop. Does that make sense or no?
Yes.
Okay.
I got lost with the reverse.
Sorry, a motorcycle just ran by at the same time you spoke. You got lost where?
With the reverse, but I got it now.
Oh, okay, yes. So the reverse is just so I get them in this order. So if I type in sumo wrestle, it's going to be at the top instead of at the bottom.
Okay.
That's more just like a user-friendly experience than like you don't have to have that reverse there. I just have it there because I want people, because if I had this huge list, like, right, and then they type something and they put like snack. If it was all the way at the bottom, they wouldn't see that it worked unless they scrolled down.
Yeah.
I probably don't want to be able to make empty to-dos. That's probably a bad user experience. So I'm just going to add required to my form, to my input. So now I can't make an empty to-do.
Question, Corey.
Yep.
Can you quickly go back over like the combined reducer and like the visibility action? Like I wonder why we can't put all of that in like in one action file, like the visibility action. The stuff that we have in the visibility action.
This one?
Yeah.
Why don't we have this in one file?
Yeah, why can't that go in our other
So for a project this size, it probably could or can, right? Because there's not much to this project really. But in general, you kind of want to separate your files by their concerns. So this has nothing to do with our to-do slice of state at all. Like it does change things for like the to-dos we see, but that's all happening on the, like just for the user's visualness. But like as far as the upkeep of the store, this doesn't affect the to-do slice on the store at all. So because of that, I've opted to put it in its own file and to do actions in their own file, because these are things that only have to do with to-dos, while this has more to do with our visibility slice of state. It's just a separation of concerns.
Oh, okay.
But it would be okay. I mean, for a project this size, I mean, you could get away with putting a lot of things in, you know, one file. Just because it's not too deep of a project. It's a good project. It's just, you know, if you think about it in terms of like compared to a full website like Yelp or like Instagram or something, right? It's like it's so small that it's harder to get lost in the file structure. But setting up a file structure is not a bad idea, just because you will get into. That's one of the things we hear like about from alumni that they found was hard for them to adjust, is just how massive the code base is at the companies they're working at is. So it can be kind of like, holy crap, there's just so many files.
Gotcha.
Cool. Any other questions on this?
Can I see I think it was visibility reducer, I think it was. It's in the reducer file. Yeah. This also could not have been in like
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it could, not really, because this is its own slice of state.
oh yeah. Yeah.
And those slices of states are determined here, where we say there's a to-do slice, a next ID, and a visibility, and they point to their own prospective reducers. So if they're not really sharing the same slice, they should probably have their own file.
Okay.
And again, this is just another way to export things. You can say export default, and I don't have to name it here, and I can name it whatever I want when I import it. I didn't stay consistent in this project because I wrote this one like this, but that was more just to show an example. You should remain consistent with whatever one you choose. Let me push this. Okay, so this has been pushed as well, so you have a reference to it. Okay, let's stop the share for a minute. Let's throw out that poll. Let's see how we're feeling on this. Yeah, let's relaunch our poll here. Nobody can see it, right? Maybe you can see it now. No, nobody can see it? For real? Brilliant. Okay, I'll end this poll and try again. Okay, let's try again. Here we go. Here we go.
Yes. We
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Show me the money. Show me the poll. Okay, we got 15 people voted so far. Let's get a couple more. Get your vote. Get your vote. Yabba dabba vote. Does anything rhyme with vote? I guess throat? Throat rhymes with vote, right? And
Moat.
coat. Oh, yeah, coat. All right, good. Vote. Yeah, I guess actually tons of words. Come to think of it. Okay, we're hanging around 15. Not going to wait for the couple of people who maybe left their computer. Okay. I will share the results, maybe, if that works. Shared? No, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Killer. Killer Queen. I love Queen. Okay. Yeah, so pretty much the same as we were. I think these are actually the same numbers as we were before we implemented, right when we came back from the break. So that's interesting. I don't think I have any way of seeing who's who, so whatever. I wonder if it's the same people in the same boat. Okay, cool. So let's go into breakout rooms for a few minutes and just like spend a little bit of time talking in groups. Like the groups are gonna be 4 to 5 people each. So just spend like a few minutes like talking about like Redux, what you're finding interesting, what you're still struggling with, what you've learned about Redux, and like just kind of have a little bit, of a conversation about Redux and where you're at and what you need to work on still in Redux. Let's do it for 10 minutes just so we can like have a feel and get kind of like connected as talking with each other in a class as well. Okay? Are we good with that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to open the rooms and I'll see y'all in 10. Recording again. I'm sorry I didn't record during that takeaway. That memory will live on in us. I want to just share what Danny was talking about when we built our Create store on our first day. Well, your second day, our first day together. We built. You can see this, yeah. Okay, we built this Create store function, right? And this mimicked the behavior. So it took in our root reducer, it took in this initial state and our enhancers, which we weren't using yet. We set our state to be this initial state, and we get this back every time we call get state. And then we also had this dispatch. We don't really need to worry about subscribe, but we had this dispatch that took in this action. And then it called, with our reducer, it passed in our state and that action, and it set the new state to be that. Right? That was what's happening under the hood. I don't know if that reminder helps people, but hopefully if it helps one person, it's worth it. Okay, so that's that. So the next thing I wanted to talk about here today is, so far we've just been living in this world of synchronous code, right? Everything we've done has been synchronous, which has been cool. It's been nice. But there is this idea in Redux where sometimes you want to do things that are asynchronous, right? So maybe we want to interact with our database, and whatever we get back from our database, like let's say we wanted to add a to-do, and we sent that to-do's information into the backend, and it gave us back this to-do, like the real to-do with its ID, and we go, okay, when we want to put that, add that into our Redux state. Well, how does that work? Right? Now, there are a couple ways to do this. I'm going to teach today kind of the more traditional approach. And we can do this with middleware. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen and jump back into our code. Desktop 2. So we are going to start by updating our store. So before, where our store was just taking logger, we are going to npm and install a new package. So we're going to npm install something called Redux Thunk.
Oh, you didn't write
npm, not MPP.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you should definitely write npm. I will write MPP. No. So we're going to, we're going to install our Redux Thunk. So Redux Thunk is a really cool piece of middleware. And to remind you what middleware does is when this action is getting dispatched and it's on its way to the reducer, right? It's traveling, dun, 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 reducer's here, right? It's trying to make its way. The middleware soars in, can do stuff, right? And then it can go ahead and could continue it on its way, or it could send it back, right? It could do anything it wants. The middleware is intercepting. It's acting in the middle between this dispatched action and our reducer, right? So previously we would just dispatch an action and then hit the reducer. Dispatch an action, hit the reducer. Now we can dispatch an action, hit our middleware, which is what we were already doing with logger, but now we're really talking about it. And then it's going to do something. and then go ahead and let it continue on towards our reducer. So let's go ahead and talk more about this as we import things. So let's go ahead and import Thunk from Redux Thunk. Now there's a few different ways to do this. As mentioned, another popular one is Redux Saga. Thunk seems to be the most popular. Thunk is the past tense of think, I guess, is what they say. But we can just go ahead and add Thunk into our middleware here. So we can do logger, comma, Thunk. And I'm going to save that. Let me see what the chats are saying. Redux Thunk, Uptown Thunk, Uptown Thunk, don't give it to me. Okay. So we've got our store, we've got this Thunk. What is Thunk gonna do? Thunk will allow us to dispatch functions as well as actions. What? Right? Now, don't let this completely blow your mind. It's going to be A-okay, I promise. But essentially what that means is if we tried dispatching a function ever, it would freak out. Now, the way this is actually written, I could look it up. I don't really remember anymore. I think it looks something like const thunk is equal to state, which is equal to next, which is a function. Which is a function that takes in, is it the action, which then we do if type of, I know this probably doesn't make too much sense yet, but if we say if type of action is equal to function, then we're going to call next with the action. Is that right? I can look that up somewhere. I have it written down. Let me look it up really quick. Let's just look up the code. I know where I can find it. So if I go to React and I look at middleware Thunks, yeah, okay, so it's dispatch, action, dispatch. Okay, I'm just going to take this. Okay. So the code is essentially this. So our state is being destructured into get state and dispatch. It could also just be state. That would be fine. And we could do state.dispatch and state.get state also, right? Those are both of our functions. So the thunk is intercepting this call in the middle, and it says, hey, if this action is actually a function and not our action object that we're expecting, we're going to go ahead and fire this action and pass in dispatch as well as our state. Otherwise, we're just going to return our next action. So this is an example of, this is essentially what Thunk does under the hood. Now, if that line of code doesn't really make the most sense to you, it's okay. It'll probably make more sense later, but it's just this idea that we're going to check to see if the action we're dispatching is actually a function. If it is, we're going to fire that function and pass some stuff to it. Otherwise, we're just going to dispatch the action as usual to the reducer. That's essentially all that is. But Redux Thunk does that for us. So we don't have to remember this. Instead, we can just write this. Okay, so let's go see kind of an example of this. So in our to-do actions, we have this receive to do. But what if we really just wanted to add a to-do, right? Let's pretend that add to-do was our goal. Let me see, where's my notes for this lesson? Okay, hang on, sorry. Just give me a second. I'm using some previous notes. Farmer actions. Okay. So, oh, and this switched around on me again. Okay. So what? So let's go ahead and say that I have. Let's go ahead and make some asynchronous function, right? Let's go ahead and create a function where I'm saying const, like I'm adding a to do to some database. Okay. And of course, I don't currently have a database set up. I'm going to leave that up to you for your homework. But for me, I'm just going to have this. This is going to return some promise. It's going to take to do. So this already returns a promise, right? But I'm going to await. And I'm going to have some new promise. And this is just going to resolve after I set timeout. Resolve. And we'll say, let's give it a 3 seconds. Okay. And after that, we'll return some success call. Like this is what we would be getting back from our database. So let's give it a message where we say like to do added, and we'll also just pass in the to do. We'll just pretend we have this new to do. Okay. Let's actually see how this function works. Okay. So I am going to put it in here in our console here. Hit enter. So now I have this add to do. So I can say add to do to a database, and let's pretend I'm passing in some to do where I have my body that says like milk. And I invoke, and if I invoke this, it's a promise, right? And it's going to take a while to resolve. So let's go ahead and say then res, and I'll just console log our res. Okay, so once this promise resolves, we're going to go ahead and log our response, just so we can see what this function does. So it waits, and it should wait 3 seconds or so, and then we get our message to do added, where we have our to do, right? So this is just mimicking the behavior of some slow database call, right? 1, 2, 3, bingo. Okay, any questions on that? Cool. Okay, so let's go back to the code where we have this add to do to database. So this is some async function. So what we want to do is create a to do, and then we want to like add that into our Redux store. Okay, so instead of exporting receive to do, I'm going to hold off on that. And I'm going to write some function where I'm going to export this one instead, where I'm going to say const, let's go ahead and like create a to do. Okay, and what this does is it takes in our to do. So this is going to mirror somewhat of this. But here's where it gets a little bit different. Because we're doing this asynchronous call and we've got to deal with promises, we need to hold off on the dispatch until we've actually done this. So we need to wait. So in order to wait, we can have this now return a function. Because if you remember, our thunk is going to say, okay, if this is a function and not an action, then I can go ahead and call this function and pass the state and dispatch. So we can go ahead and return here a function. I'm going to make this async await. So, and this function takes in that dispatch, right? Remember, it takes in dispatch and get state. So, but I'm only caring about the dispatch in this scenario. There is an optional get state here. Okay, and so this function, right? This is kind of like our looks like our closure examples. This function is going to go ahead and make its request to our database. So we'll say res dot await, and I'm going to say like add to do to database, and let's pretend that this took in my to do, and you know, in real life this could be some kind of axios.get or some kind of function that returns a promise. Okay, so I'm going to wait for that to get back. Maybe I should probably be adding my try catch.
Also, did you install Axios?
I did not, but I'm not actually using Axios right now. This is a fake call to a database. This is just setting a timeout for 3 seconds while we wait for it to resolve. So this is kind of a fake out. Otherwise, I wouldn't need to install Axios. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so once we get our results, then we're going to want to dispatch. So now we can go ahead and dispatch. And what we can dispatch is what we used to have, our receive to do. So I'm going to say receive to do. And inside of here, I'll be doing my res. Now, if I was doing Axios, it'd probably be res.data.whatever. But in this case, it's just res.to do, because this is what my response is. I could do data here if I do it like this. If we really want to mimic, I can do like something like that. Now it's res.data.to do. Okay. In the event that there's an error, I should be handling this as well. And we can talk about that in a minute, but for now, I'll just console log my error. But that way we can see this actually happening. So now instead of calling receive to do from our form here, to do form, let's actually instead use create to do, because this would be what we were really using in our function, let's say. So we call create to do, and that's going to go to our actions, and it's going to return this function. And this function is an async await function that's going to wait for the asynchronous go to occur. And after that, it will then go ahead and dispatch our action, because now we can dispatch functions or actions because of Thunk. Thunk is the middleware that's intercepting and checking. Just a quick reminder what Thunk looks like, right? It's taking in the state, it's got next, it's got the action. So this is the function of what we want to happen next, and this is our action. But if that action is a function, we want to invoke that function and pass in our dispatch argument as well as our get state argument. Otherwise, we're just going to return our next and action. This would let us continue on to the reducer, because the reducers are not set up, nor should they be set up to deal with functions. Our reducers only are going to touch plain old actions. Okay, so let's see this in action. So now, going back to our application, we can refresh and we can say, all right, we want to buy milk. And when I hit enter, it should take 3 seconds for it to actually show up. So we're waiting, we wait, and then there it comes. So let's take a look at the story of this. So we can see our previous state, right, was empty, everything was empty. And then our action here was we've dispatched this function here. And so our next state remained the same because it got held up. And then we fired that function afterwards. We were able to dispatch our receive to do the second time through. So we see there's actually 2 calls now for each time because there's 2 different dispatches. Again, I can see like I can write eat sugar, and we'll have to wait our 3 seconds. And now we have our eat sugar. Interesting. Interesting. And I'm sure we have lots of questions. Let's hear some.
Can you just show the code again?
Sure. So this can be written in shorter hand by just directly returning it like this. This is the way I generally write this. So we have our create to do, takes in a to do, and this is returning this function that takes in dispatch. This time we will wait while we do some sort of asynchronous action. And then when that's over, we'll go ahead and dispatch our receive to do. So let's say we go if to do dot body is equal to soda, we can go ahead and throw an error that says no soda allowed. Okay. Let's see what happens. So we go back to our code and we write soda and we hit enter. And we get all this junk here, and I guess we console log no soda allowed, but we haven't really done anything. You know, and we can buy milk, and this time it will work in 3 seconds. So, you know, it's not breaking our app, but there is a good practice of adding another reducer. So or more. So let's say I'm going to add an errors reducer. So I'm going to say errors reducer.js. And I'm going to just export. Okay, I'm going to do const errors reducer. And this is going to take in our state, which I'm going to make it be just null or an empty string. Maybe I'll just do an empty string for now. And then I'll have an action. We'll make our switch skeleton. And in the case of action.type, if we receive error, we haven't written this yet, but we will. Let's just go ahead and return, return our action.payload. Otherwise, we will return our state. Let's also have a way for us to clear our errors. Like, so once we've given feedback to the user, we don't forever have errors in our folder. So I'll just also clear errors. This will make more sense later. And we'll return just an empty string. Let's export this.
Errors is misspelled.
Yeah. Thank you. Errors reducer. Okay, I'm just not going to misspell these here. Action types. Let's go ahead and add these. Okay. And let's go ahead and make some error actions. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to go air actions, right? This is somewhat repetitive stuff, and we will import clear errors. And what was the other one? Receive error. And we'll say that's from, and let me just copy that so far, from /action types. And we'll just make these functions real quick where we say clear errors. And this is just going to do a type of clear errors. Doesn't need a payload. And we'll say export const of receive errors, where it will take in an error. And we will say type of receive error payload error. Okay, so we've set that up now, so that's cool. I think we still have to import these in our error reducer. Whoops. Must be in the wrong thing. Okay, there we go. Import those from /actions/action types. Okay, and let's go ahead and add our errors reducer in our root reducer, right? So now we've added a whole new slice of state. Import errors reducer from /errors reducer. Did I capitalize this here? I did. Okay. And then we will go ahead and go errors and errors reducer. Oops. Oh. Okay. Okay. So now we should have more state, or we have our errors are empty. So now we can go ahead and import receive errors also into our to-do actions. So we can import that function. So let's go ahead and import receive errors from /error actions. And so in the event of this, I don't actually want to dispatch the error, but instead instead of console logging, I'm gonna dispatch my receive errors, misspelled. And I'm gonna pass this my error.message. Okay, so now we could actually use this to display information to the user in the event. So clear errors, I just made a little mistake in our error actions. I forgot to throw on the arrow. Okay. And some mistake here. It's not returning an object. This needs to be wrapped. Okay. Receive errors is not exported from error actions. Okay. So that's because I misspelled it here. There we go. Okay, so let's say we go milk. We hit enter, we wait our 3 seconds, and it works, and we get this. But now when we write soda, we won't just get this console log of errors, but instead we should be hitting our receive error, and we see that now we have this error where it says no soda allowed inside of this slice of state. So if we had something looking for a slice of state for like, hey, if there's any errors, let's go ahead and display these errors to the users, right? If you've ever like filled out a form and then it says like, oh, that username is already taken, right? This is kind of that example, but instead you would have it print, you know, username is taken, please try again. And then when they hit it, you would, when they go to type, you would want to clear those errors again because it doesn't hang out forever. Does that kind of make sense? You can give me a yes or no on that nonverbal feedback feature. Getting some yeses. It's okay to put no. Don't be shy. If you're one of the no's, it's okay. It is a new concept. Jenny, that's a great cat. It's so cute. Oh my goodness. Okay. So we're split into thirds or so. That's not too bad actually for the intro. It's cool we're not there yet. But that's not too bad. We're getting there. Let's see if we can convert more. So let's recap. So we have this thing called a thunk. The thunk is the middleware. And let's take a look at it. And what this actually does is and we can think of this also, we could destructure this. So we will. Let's say we're destructuring this from our store. And we say get state. And then we can go ahead and remove these. And so what this is doing is this is a function that that returns a function, which returns a function. A little confusing, but how it's happening is it just is intercepting anything that gets dispatched. So once something is dispatched, which has typically been an action up to this point, although now maybe a function, but before it hits a reducer, where our reducer is expecting, our reducer must get this action, and that action must have a type, and then we're going to update that slice of state, right? This is a pattern we've hit that we keep hitting. A dispatch of an action goes to the reducer. Reducer makes an update to the state, right? Dispatch an action goes to reducer. The reducer updates a slice of state, right? This is that pattern. Now, if someone dispatches a function, that would break. That would absolutely break our reducers. It would just throw an error. The application might break. But we still need the ability to sometimes dispatch an action if we want to have clean asynchronous code running. So we have this thunk. And you can think of it as a thunk has a few things that it's taken in, even though it's split up into different functions. But at the end of the day, it's checking to see, hey, is this action a function? So if this action is a function, it just, if this action is not a function, it just continues on with normal, where it goes ahead and dispatches this to the rest of the reducer or to whatever middleware comes next, essentially. And so then it can keep going, business as usual. But if our action is indeed a function, we're going to fire that action, fire that function, and pass in the function calls of dispatch and get state. And so we can actually see this happening in our new to-do actions right here, where we've created a baloney add to-do to database. You don't have to really worry about this. I just want this to be mimicking some call to a database. It's pretending to be like that. It's a little slow. It's a 3-seconder. Maybe we would have a spinner happening, right? And so we would say, okay, try, go ahead and add it to the database. In the event that it's successful, now go ahead and dispatch our regular action where we say receive to do res.data.to-do. In the event that an error is thrown, go ahead and dispatch a receive errors. So this way we can give our user some feedback on. This way we can get offered some feedback on what our error actually is. So this is an advantage because here we can dispatch multiple times, right? So let's say I had a UI aspect. So anytime something is fetching, I'm showing a spinner to load, right? So I kept that in a slice of state. So I could dispatch here. I could write dispatch in any successful call. I could dispatch some kind of like toggle loading, right? So then, and this would be some function that we haven't set this up, but this could go and toggle our loading. And in the event that it's successful, we could toggle it right back, right after we've received our thing. So we have a lot more control and power on the order that things are being dispatched and what is being dispatched when we start dealing with what's called an asynchronous action creator. Okay, give me some questions. All right, well, how about this? We have 10 minutes left. I'm going to tell you what you should be working on during your free time from here through tomorrow, and then what you'll be working on during class tomorrow as well. So what I want you to do is, and I'll write it down, I want you to build a backend for your application. You will need to be able to fetch all your to-dos, all to-dos, add to-dos, complete, or I'll put toggle to-dos, toggle to-dos. These need to be saved into your backend. Okay, so you're going to have to update your functions. Bonus, add a spinner and a UI. Yeah, I'll just add a spinner to match your loading state. Handle and display errors to users. Okay, so now that you know what I'm going to ask you to be doing, now you can go ahead and ask questions. You can ask more questions.
So quick question.
Yeah.
So with the Thunk, all it's there to do is to see if we're dispatching a function instead of an action, right?
That's right.
So why wouldn't we just dispatch an action, being that once we go get, or once we go post something or whatever and get back our res.data, we're just using that res.data to actually like in our action creator to be able to dispatch that. So why don't we just why do we need, why would we be dispatching a function?
Yeah, very cool. So your question is essentially, why are we dispatching a function over actually just making the async await request in the component itself and then getting the response and then dispatching that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question, and that's definitely a pattern that some people use. I did a lot of reading on this because I figured I'd get this question today, and I did post something on Stack Overflow to see if I can get a better answer than the one I'm about to give. But essentially, there in a big application, in a large scale application, you may want to be able to reuse certain calls. You may want to be able to fetch all your to-dos from different, let's say, different spots in your application. And so by having that, you don't have to duplicate some of that code like that you'd be writing in your use effect. I read something about it decoupling the information so that it's not so tied to that specific component, but is again more loose and reusable. This is a pattern that exists in the wild pretty frequently. That is another answer. I know that's not ideal. I don't know, like I recognize what you're asking, and I was thinking the same type of thing today, but there is this pattern that exists a lot out there. And so it's good to know.
So we just gotta, it just has to, we just gotta do it basically.
It's good to know. It allows you to like really dispatch a lot more actions and have it a lot more controlled. Your code also does look a lot cleaner. I wrote it the other way today just to see, and it looks quite a bit cleaner, because otherwise, like we have, let's say we have all this would all go inside of our submit, and then we would be, but like it would be, it's just not split up as nicely. It's harder to maintain and harder to read.
Okay.
But I encourage you to play around with it and different patterns and whatnot.
All right, cool. So you said there's another pattern, right, that we could do?
Well, I mean, that hypothetically works. I haven't been able to find much material on that pattern really existing in the wild. Pretty much every single thing I read is talking about thunks.
Okay.
So I would go with the grain.
All right. I'm down.
Yeah. Because the other one's definitely a little bit more intuitive. So I thought like it would be good, but literally every single thing I'm reading is about thunks. Any other questions on this? Okay, so it has been pushed, so you can read what you are expected to do. It's living in the to-do actions. I'll also post this on Slack. And this is what we'll also be working on all day tomorrow. Let me just post it in the Slack now. But if there's no other questions, that's the end of class. You're welcome to go. I'll stick around because I believe there probably are some more questions from shy people.
My only question is, what time are you gonna post this video?
I will post it as soon as it finishes uploading.
All right, cool.
At a minimum, I'll probably be able to post the Zoom link tonight or tomorrow morning.
All right, cool. No problem. Good night.
Good night.
Corey?
Yeah.
This is